The air in the terminal was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unearned privilege. This is the moment when a successful man, a veteran of Wall Street, Mr. Adrian Vance, was publicly reduced to a criminal suspect. All because of the color of his skin and the assumption of a hurried, dismissive airline agent named Brenda. She saw his tailored suit, his expensive watch, and the gold glow of his luggage tag, but all she registered was a face that didn't fit her narrow idea of success. His flight, Atlantic Skyways Flight 307 to Geneva, was about to board. But before he could step onto the jet bridge, Brenda unleashed a lie that would change everything. Not just for him, but for her entire career. The clock on the immense digital departure board at JFK's Terminal 4 ticked precisely to 8:45 p.m. Adrian Vance, 42, a senior partner at the global finance firm Sterling and Finch, adjusted the knot of his silk tie. He was a man accustomed to precision, whether it was balancing a $200 million portfolio or catching a flight with 3 minutes to spare. Tonight, he was early. He stood by gate A14, impeccably dressed in a charcoal Brioni suit, projecting an aura of quiet, understated power. His mission, a critical, last-minute deal in Geneva, a deal that would secure the acquisition of a major European bank. This was not a trip he could miss. Adrian watched the agents at the Atlantic Skyway counter begin the pre-boarding process for first and business class passengers heading to Geneva. He had his boarding pass, a pristine, heavy stock ticket marked first class, in his hand, ready. At the podium was Brenda Hayes, a gate agent whose exhaustion was only matched by her cynicism. Brenda had been working double shifts, nursing a grudge against the airline's management, and possessed a talent for making snap, often negative, judgments about passengers. Next to her stood Gary Sinclair, a junior agent, pale and nervous, desperately trying to keep up. A few first-class passengers, an older, impeccably coiffed woman named Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, and a loud, ruddy-faced businessman named Mr. Thomas Finch, no relation to Adrian's firm, ironically, were processed without a hitch, their boarding passes scanned, a polite, "Enjoy your flight, sir, ma'am." Adrian approached the podium. He placed his passport and boarding pass on the scanner, offering a polite, professional smile. "Good evening," Adrian said, his voice calm and deep. "Adrian Vance, first class." Brenda didn't look up. She glanced at the name on the screen, then finally her eyes flicked up to his. The professional courtesy she had offered the previous 2 passengers vanished instantly, replaced by a wall of suspicion. Her brow furrowed, and she snatched his boarding pass off the machine. "Let me see that again," she muttered, not to him, but to herself. She turned the ticket over, scrutinizing the Atlantic Skyway logo as if she suspected it was a forgery. "Is there an issue, Agent?" Adrian asked, his voice now betraying a slight tension. I'm not seeing the first-class designation properly updated in the system, sir." Brenda lied smoothly, a familiar flicker of adrenaline warming her. She knew the designation was there. It was bright green on her screen. But she had already decided, in the fraction of a second it took her to look at him, that he did not belong. A first-class ticket? Must be an upgrade scam, a mistake, or worse. "It's Seat 1A, Agent Hayes," Adrian corrected, pointing to the printed number. "I booked it 3 months ago. I'm sure it's correct." Brenda ignored the gentle correction, her focus shifting. "Sir, with all due respect, I need to verify your identity against the booking agent's confirmation. Standard security protocol for unverified premium seating." She paused, then lowered her voice conspiratorially, yet loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "And frankly, sir, your demeanor is a little suspicious." The word suspicious hung in the air, a poisonous gas cloud. The crowd waiting for pre-boarding turned their heads. Thomas Finch, the ruddy-faced man, actually snorted a small laugh. Adrian felt a hot wave of anger cresting, but he forced himself to stay calm. He was an expert at poker face. His job demanded it. But the sheer audacity of the accusation was staggering. "Agent Hayes," Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave, now laced with steel. "I am flying to Geneva for a major business transaction. I am a first-class passenger. I have offered you my passport and my verified ticket. Please scan the boarding pass and allow me to proceed." Brenda leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Sir, if you become difficult, I will call airport security immediately. I am simply trying to do my job and ensure only legitimate passengers are allowed on board. Frankly, I find your insistence on a quick scan without proper verification to be the most suspicious part of this entire interaction. I believe this ticket might be invalid." Gary, the junior agent, visibly winced. He knew Brenda was manufacturing this issue. He briefly leaned toward the microphone, wanting to intervene, but a sharp glare from Brenda silenced him. Adrian had reached his limit. He realized this wasn't an issue of a faulty scanner or a system glitch. This was personal. This was a deliberate attempt to shame and delay him. He inhaled deeply, then slowly, deliberately, reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit. He pulled out a black, sleek leather holder, the kind used for corporate identification, and flipped it open. He did not place it on the counter. He held it up, directly in front of Brenda's face, letting the light from the terminal lamps catch the insignia. "Agent Hayes," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the gate area like a whip crack. "You want to talk about legitimate passengers? You want to talk about a ticket being invalid?" Brenda squinted at the ID. Her face went slack. It wasn't a corporate ID. It wasn't a passport. It was a metal, gold-plated badge engraved with a single, elegant letter, CR, and a 5-pointed star, surrounding a raised, unmistakable company emblem. Beneath the emblem, engraved in thin, precise script, were 2 words, Chairman's Circle. And beneath that, the kicker, Lifetime Global Access. It was the rarest, most exclusive, and most valuable loyalty card an airline could issue, reserved for the top 0.01% of customers who spent millions of dollars annually with the carrier. It was the ID of someone who could, if he felt like it, pick up the phone and speak directly to the airline's CEO. Brenda's mouth opened slightly. She had just publicly accused one of Atlantic Skyway's most valuable assets of being a fraud and a security risk. Adrian, never taking his eyes off her, finally placed the VIP badge down on the counter, right next to his ticket, covering the spot where the system had clearly shown his first-class status all along. "That badge," Adrian said, his tone utterly devoid of emotion, "represents over $20 million in personal travel with your company over the last 15 years. It means I am a recognized VIP. It means I have priority over any security protocol you claim is standard. And most importantly, Agent Hayes, it means you just called the single most loyal customer you have, a customer who funds your salary. Suspicious." He then leaned in, lowering his voice one last time, though everyone in the quieted terminal could still hear. "You're right," he said. "This is a security protocol issue. You just ignored the one badge that entitles me to walk onto that plane without even showing the ticket." Gary, the junior agent, finally found his voice, a high-pitched squeak of panic. "Mrs. Hayes, that's a Chairman's Circle badge. We have to call the actual security manager immediately and inform them." The silence following Gary's panicked exclamation was so absolute that Adrian could hear the gentle hum of the jet bridge cooling systems. The attention of the entire boarding area was fixed on Brenda Hayes, who was frozen in a tableau of utter dread. Her professional mask had shattered. The previous arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a sheen of cold sweat on her temples. She stared at the gold badge, its weight suddenly feeling like an anvil dropped onto her chest. She knew what the chairman's circle meant. It wasn't just miles or upgrades. It was institutional power. "Mr. Vance," Brenda stammered, scrambling to recover, her voice thin and reedy. I apologize." There must have been a system delay in recognizing the chairman's status. It was a purely routine security measure. "It was not routine, Agent Hayes," Adrian interrupted, his voice calm, but radiating a devastating finality. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It was prejudice, cloaked poorly in procedure. You didn't recognize my status. You recognized my skin color, and you chose to treat me like a common thief. He picked up the gold chairman's circle badge and tucked it back into his jacket, making a mental note of its exact weight. He then retrieved his boarding pass. Gary, sensing a catastrophe and desperate to mitigate it, rushed forward. "Mr. Vance, sir, please allow me. I'm Gary Sinclair. My sincerest apologies for my colleague's error. Please board at once. I'll personally notify the purser and the captain that you are on your way, and that your preferred wine and amenities should be prepared immediately." Adrian nodded slowly at Gary, a flicker of appreciation for the junior agent's quick thinking. Gary had done what he could. He turned back to Brenda, who looked pale and ill. "Agent Hayes," Adrian said, leaning closer, ensuring his words were only for her. "I want nothing from you. No apology, no explanation. I just want you to understand that actions have consequences, especially when those actions are driven by bias and lack of respect." He straightened up, his height dominating her. Without another word, Adrian Vance scanned his own first-class ticket. It beeped green immediately, confirming what everyone already knew, and walked onto the jet bridge. He did not look back. As Adrian disappeared, the chaos erupted softly behind him. Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, the older woman, approached Brenda. "Did you hear that, Thomas? Chairman's circle? That's Mr. Vance, the one who structured the acquisition of Global Tech last year. Brenda, darling, you've made a terrible mistake." Brenda was already fumbling for the red emergency phone under the counter. She called her immediate supervisor, Mr. Douglas "Doug" Peterson, the shift manager for Atlantic Skyways JFK operations. Doug Peterson was a man who lived by the rule book, a man who saw customer complaints as bureaucratic hurdles, not reflections of reality. "What is it, Brenda? I'm buried in baggage claim issues." Doug barked into the phone. "Doug, it's bad," Brenda whispered, fear making her voice tremble. "The first-class passenger for Geneva, Adrian Vance. I challenged his ticket. I asked for additional ID and called him suspicious. Doug, he's a Chairman's Circle Lifetime member." A profound, terrifying silence stretched across the phone line. "You did what, Brenda?" Doug's voice was now dangerously low. "Do you know what the Chairman's Circle means? It means the family is traveling. It means they're the air we breathe. I told you to just wave them through. What did he say? Did he threaten us?" "No, but he looked like he was writing an obituary for my career. Gary saw the badge, too. What do I do?" Doug took a deep, shaky breath. "Okay, damage control. I'm coming to the gate. I need you to go into the system and flag his record. Put a note. Gate agent error. Apology rendered. Amenity voucher issued. Make it look like we fixed it immediately. And Brenda, you don't mention the suspicious comment, ever." He hung up, the damage control wheels spinning frantically in his mind. Doug's primary goal was self-preservation. If a complaint hit corporate, He needed to prove he was proactive. Adrian walked into the expansive first-class cabin, a sanctuary of muted leather and polished wood. He was greeted by the lead purser, Ms. Camilla Jensen, a seasoned professional who recognized the unspoken signs of a high-value traveler instantly. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance," Camilla said, her smile genuine and warm. "We are truly honored to have you. May I take your jacket?" Adrian gave her his jacket, and as she hung it, she noticed the glimpse of the gold chain and the edge of the chairman's circle ID tucked safely away. Her demeanor shifted from highly professional to truly reverent. "Mr. Vance, I understand there was an unfortunate incident at the gate," Camilla murmured, leaning in slightly as she escorted him to his suite, 1A. "A junior agent mistake, I'm sure." Adrian settled into the plush seat, already adjusting the privacy screen. "No, Ms. Jensen. It was a conscious decision by a senior agent. But it is handled. I simply need a moment of peace." "Of course, sir. Consider this your private office for the next 7 hours. The captain, Mark Donovan, sends his personal regards. He's looking forward to a smooth flight. I'll be back with a glass of the 09 Bordeaux immediately. Please don't hesitate to ask for anything at all." Camilla retreated, but Adrian wasn't relaxing. He didn't open his laptop to start working on the Geneva deal. Instead, he pulled out his phone. He didn't call the chairman's circle hotline. That would be noisy and public. He went straight to his email. Adrian Vance had spent 20 years in high finance, learning that the most powerful revenge is quiet, surgical, and traceable. He drafted a concise, precise email to Mr. Robert Sterling, the Chief Operating Officer, COO of Atlantic Skyway, and a man Adrian had closed a major deal with 5 years prior. The subject line was chillingly simple: Urgent Inquiry, Terminal Conduct Standard Review, JFK. The body of the email contained no inflammatory language, no demands for firings, and no mention of race. It simply detailed the facts. 1. Time, location, 8:50 p.m., Gate A14, JFK. 2. Parties involved, Adrian Vance, Chairman's Circle, Flight ASW 307, and Agent Brenda Hayes. 3. Action. Agent Hayes deliberately refused to scan a valid first-class ticket, then escalated the confrontation by falsely claiming the passenger's demeanor was suspicious, and that the ticket was invalid in clear violation of protocol regarding high-tier loyalty members. 4. Evidence. Multiple witnesses, including fellow first-class passengers and junior agent Gary Sinclair. The gate system logs will confirm the agent's delay and false override attempts. 5. Request. A full review of the agent's operational history, disciplinary record, and adherence to company policy regarding customer service and integrity. This behavior must be addressed internally before it becomes a public liability. Adrian finished the email, read it twice for maximum coolness and professionalism, and hit send. He knew the email would land directly in the COO's inbox, bypassing all layers of customer service bureaucracy. He knew Robert Sterling, upon seeing the sender's name and the gravity of the subject, would interrupt whatever he was doing to address it. The clock had begun ticking, not just on Brenda Hayes, but on everyone who had allowed, perpetuated, or attempted to cover up the prejudice at Gate A14. Adrian settled back, the taste of the expensive Bordeaux rich on his tongue. He had made his move. The karma was now airborne. The email from Adrian Vance hit the inbox of Robert Sterling, the COO of Atlantic Skyway, precisely at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Robert was at a black tie charity dinner in downtown Manhattan, fielding polite but endless questions about the airline's latest quarterly earnings. He felt his phone buzz with a special, unique notification tone, the one reserved exclusively for high-priority alerts or his most important contacts. Seeing Adrian Vance's name immediately sobered him up. Adrian Vance was not merely a wealthy customer. He was a key figure in high-stakes finance, a mover of markets, and a frequent flyer whose annual revenue contribution dwarfed that of entire small to mid-size corporations. Adrian's business was worth retaining at any cost. Robert excused himself abruptly from his table, walked to a quiet corridor, and read the email. As he absorbed the clinical detached narrative, deliberately refused to scan, falsely claiming the passenger's demeanor was suspicious, violation of protocol regarding high-tier loyalty members. His face went pale beneath the dim lighting. Adrian hadn't asked for a complimentary upgrade or a refund. He had asked for a full review of the agent's operational history and integrity. That kind of request, coming from a chairman's circle member, was equivalent to a regulatory investigation. Adrian wasn't angry. He was dangerous. Robert immediately called his executive vice president of operations, Ms. Vanessa Brown, a sharp, unflappable woman known for her surgical efficiency in crisis management. "Vanessa, stop whatever you're doing." Robert's voice was clipped and urgent. "Read the email I just forwarded. Subject, urgent inquiry, JFK. We have a crisis, and it's contained to gate A14. Adrian Vance is on flight 307. Someone called him suspicious and tried to block him from the boarding." Vanessa, already on her secure line, pulled up the email. She scanned the text, her professional calm briefly flickering. "A chairman's circle member, Robert? And they used the S-word? This is beyond a policy violation. This is a PR disaster waiting to happen if he decides to go public," Vanessa stated, already launching into problem-solving mode. "We need to isolate the agent, lock down the system logs, and get a full accounting of what the supervising manager did to mitigate it. I'm sending a team to JFK immediately." Back at Terminal 4, the shift manager, Doug Peterson, was feeling deeply uncomfortable. He had cornered Brenda near the staff lounge, his face tight with forced composure. "Brenda, look at me. You told him you apologized, right?" Doug pressed. "I tried to, Doug, but he cut me off. He said he wanted nothing from me. He just gave me this look." Brenda shivered, recounting the moment Adrian had walked away. "I noted in the system that I issued a $50 amenity voucher, just like you said." Doug pulled up the gate's transaction log on his handheld device. "Good. The voucher is logged. Now, let's see the passenger notes." He scrolled to Adrian Vance's flight record. He found Brenda's entry. "Gate agent error. Apology rendered. Amenity voucher issued." But beneath it, a new entry had just appeared, flagged in bright red. "System override notice. COO Robert Sterling request. All agent and manager notes regarding ASW 307, passenger Vance, chairman's circle, are currently being audited and sequestered by executive operations. Do not modify." Doug's blood ran cold. The COO didn't audit gate notes unless something was fundamentally, structurally wrong. His desperate attempt at a paper-over had been intercepted before the plane even crossed the Atlantic. The amenity voucher he'd instructed Brenda to issue now looked like a paltry bribe to silence a customer who deserved an executive apology. Just then, his radio crackled. It was Gary, the junior agent, sounding frantic. "Doug, there are 2 high-level security personnel and a woman in a CEO lanyard at the operations desk. They're asking for me, Brenda, and all the logs for Flight 307. I think they're from corporate. They look really, really angry." It was Vanessa Brown's team, landing like a paramilitary strike force. Doug, realizing he was now a primary witness, and worse, an accomplice in the attempted cover-up, felt the hard karma closing in. He should have disciplined Brenda immediately, not protected her, and tried to buy silence with a $50 voucher. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet above the Atlantic, Adrian Vance was enjoying the finest sleep he'd had in months. The first-class suite was dark, quiet, and comfortable. Camilla Jensen, the purser, was executing a masterpiece of high-end service. She had personally overseen the preparation of his dinner, a light, perfectly seared Chilean sea bass, and ensured his suite remained undisturbed. Adrian woke up just as the sun was starting to paint the sky with strokes of orange and purple. Camilla immediately appeared with fresh espresso and the flight's selection of international financial papers. "Mr. Vance, I took the liberty of emailing the Geneva ground team to confirm your arrival," Camilla said softly. "They'll be meeting you immediately at the jet bridge with a private car to whisk you directly to your meeting downtown. No customs, no baggage claim. They assure me it will be seamless." This was the genuine VIP service Adrian was accustomed to, the kind of treatment he paid millions for. It was a stark, almost theatrical contrast to Brenda's dismissive treatment mere hours earlier. "Thank you, Camilla," Adrian said, taking a sip of the perfect espresso. "That is greatly appreciated. You and your team have been exceptional." Camilla gave a gentle nod. "It is our pleasure, sir. We value our most loyal travelers." Adrian realized that the airline was already trying to compensate for the gate incident via exceptional in-flight service. The cost of flying Adrian Vance, the amount of labor and expense now being poured into his current experience, was exponentially higher than if Brenda had just scanned his ticket and said, "Thank you." This was the quiet, effective retaliation. Adrian hadn't yelled, he hadn't made a scene, and he hadn't asked for anything free. He had simply filed a factual report with the right person, and now the entire operational structure of Atlantic Skyway was bending itself backward, hemorrhaging goodwill and resources to correct the gross error made by one prejudiced agent. As the plane began its descent over the snow-capped Swiss Alps, Adrian opened his laptop to review his deal notes, feeling a sense of deep, focused calm. The gate agent's malice had failed to rattle him, and now she and her weak manager were facing the harsh reality of corporate scrutiny. The consequences had begun. It was 4:08 a.m. in New York, and the Atlantic Skyway Operations Center at JFK was in lockdown. Vanessa Brown's two lead investigators, Mateo Thorne, head of internal security, and Lisa Rodriguez, VP of Employee Relations, had completed their initial interviews. Brenda Hayes sat slumped in a windowless office, the fluorescent lights reflecting harshly off her pale face. Lisa Rodriguez, a meticulous woman who prided herself on cutting through lies, held up a printout of the gate logs. "Brenda, the system shows that the first-class status for Mr. Vance was clearly visible on your screen," Lisa stated calmly, but with immense authority. "It also shows you spent 90 seconds attempting to manually reject the valid ticket before you even spoke to him. Why did you lie to your supervisor, Mr. Peterson, and say you only challenged the status because of a system delay?" Brenda, defeated, looked down at her hands. I panicked. He seemed aggressive when he asked me to scan the ticket." Mateo Thorne, the head of security, leaned forward, his demeanor intimidating. Mr. Vance's actions were recorded by multiple CCTV cameras and witnessed by 3 other first-class passengers, whose statements we have already secured. They all corroborate that Mr. Vance was polite and requested service only after you initiated the delay. And we have Agent Sinclair's statement that you told Mr. Vance his demeanor was suspicious. Agent Sinclair specifically notes that Mr. Vance was completely calm until that exact moment. Brenda finally broke, the exhaustion and the weight of her prejudice crashing down. I didn't think he looked like he belonged in first class. I thought he might have stolen the ticket. I was tired, I was overworked, and I made a snap judgment." A snap judgment that jeopardized the relationship with one of our most financially vital customers, Lisa finished coldly. And the attempted cover-up with the $50 voucher, authorized by Mr. Peterson, only made the situation worse. Brenda, your employment with Atlantic Skyway is terminated immediately, effective this morning. Your actions constitute gross misconduct, discrimination, and a profound failure of company integrity. Matteo then walked over to the adjacent office, where Doug Peterson, the shift manager, was waiting. Doug, we have reviewed your communications and your instruction to Brenda Hayes to falsify the internal notes regarding the amenity voucher. Why did you instruct her to deceive corporate? Matteo asked, his voice flat. Doug immediately pointed the blame. I was trying to contain Brenda's error. She was spiraling. I had no idea of the scale of the customer's importance. I just wanted to make it look like we took care of it. Lisa entered, crossing her arms. We understand you were trying to mitigate, but you chose to prioritize hiding the truth over transparency. As a manager, you had a duty to report the breach of protocol immediately and honestly. Because you chose to cover up, and because you attempted to interfere with a high-level customer record, you are also being terminated for gross negligence and failure to adhere to ethical standards. In less than 5 hours, the corporate machine had crushed both the agent driven by bias and the manager driven by self-preservation. Back in Geneva, Adrian Vance successfully closed the acquisition deal. It was a flawless negotiation, ending exactly as he had planned. He called his wife, Simone, back home in Connecticut to share the good news before heading to his celebratory dinner. As Adrian prepared to leave the bank's headquarters, a high-level executive from the newly acquired European bank, Mr. Thierry Dupont, approached him, looking excited. Mr. Vance, what an incredible day. We are so honored to be working with you. You know, I actually spoke with your chairman, Mr. Jonathan Sterling, this afternoon to finalize the integration timeline. Jonathan Sterling, Adrian repeated, slightly confused. Jonathan Sterling was the CEO of Atlantic Skyway, the airline he had just flown. He was Robert Sterling's father. Yes, the CEO of Atlantic Skyway, Thierry confirmed. He is a very close friend of our bank's founder and one of our major minority shareholders. We were discussing your acquisition and how pleased he was to hear you were flying to Geneva on his airline. He told me he personally authorized an immediate and comprehensive investigation into the incident you reported at the gate. Adrian was stunned. He had only emailed the COO, Robert Sterling. He hadn't expected the complaint to go straight to the CEO. Did Mr. Sterling mention the nature of the incident? Adrian asked carefully. Only that a member of his staff had caused offense to a highly valued partner, Thierry replied, oblivious to the full drama. But he mentioned something very specific about the agent involved, Brenda Hayes. He said, "That young woman just made the biggest professional mistake of her life, and it's going to cost us much more than her salary." He sounded very serious. Adrian now understood the full, immediate force of the karma. He had aimed his complaint at the management level, COO, Robert Sterling. But Robert had clearly escalated the matter to his father, the chairman and CEO, Jonathan Sterling, likely because Adrian Vance was not just a first-class passenger. He was a financial colleague of the chairman himself, a man whose respect and future business the CEO valued immensely. The hard truth was revealed. Brenda Hayes didn't just insult a high-value customer. She insulted a man whose reputation was personally endorsed by the CEO. This added a cruel, yet symmetrical, twist of fate. Adrian's quiet complaint had turned into a personal affront to the CEO, guaranteeing the swiftest, most comprehensive retaliation. Adrian felt a pang of unexpected guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the principle. The CEO's reaction, wasn't just about his wallet. It was about his own integrity and promise to his customers. Adrian now had to consider his return flight. Adrian Vance concluded his business in Geneva and arrived at GVA, Geneva Cointrin Airport, 2 days later for his return journey to New York. He wasn't surprised to find a small entourage waiting for him. As he stepped out of his private car, he was greeted not by a ticket agent, but by Mr. Alastair Finch, no relation to the businessman at the gate, the European Vice President of Customer Experience for Atlantic Skyway. Alastair was impeccably dressed, radiating concern and professionalism. "Mr. Vance, welcome back," Alastair said, offering a sincere handshake. "I am Alastair Finch. I have been instructed by Mr. Robert Sterling, the COO, and Mr. Jonathan Sterling, the chairman, to personally ensure your travel experience today is flawless." Alastair didn't offer a canned apology. He cut straight to the resolution. "On behalf of Atlantic Skyway, I want to express our profound regret and unreserved apology for the abhorrent, discriminatory, and completely unacceptable treatment you received at JFK Gate A14. I assure you, the agent responsible, Brenda Hayes, and her supervising manager, Doug Peterson, were immediately terminated for gross misconduct and failure to uphold the ethical standards of our company." Alastair paused, then added the corporate twist. "The chairman also insisted we publicly demonstrate our commitment to eliminating this type of bias. Effective immediately, we have issued a formal communication to all 14,000 Atlantic Skyway customer-facing employees worldwide regarding the gravity of this incident. Furthermore, all managers, including myself, are undergoing a mandatory, week-long sensitivity and integrity training program this quarter." Adrian nodded, accepting the apology with reserved grace. "Mr. Finch, I appreciate the transparency and the speed of the action taken. I wanted integrity, and it seems you have delivered." "One final gesture, Mr. Vance," Alastair continued, leading Adrian past the main check-in, directly toward a private security line. "The chairman has instructed me to extend your chairman's circle status to include the rest of your immediate family, your wife, Simone, and your 2 children, for the next 5 years, regardless of their own travel volume. And of course, your current flight is complimentary." Adrian knew this was a massive expense for the airline, far surpassing the value of his individual ticket. It was the price of corporate shame and the frantic effort to mend a severed trust. While Adrian was being ushered into the exclusive chairman's lounge at GVA, Brenda Hayes was experiencing the first sharp sting of public exposure, the real, hard karma. Following her termination, Brenda returned to her small, rented apartment in Queens. She was devastated, but initially kept the reason for her firing vague, telling her few friends and family that it was a corporate downsizing. However, her attempt at a clean break was ruined by the junior agent, Gary Sinclair. Gary, feeling conflicted, but driven by a sense of moral duty, had anonymously leaked a detailed factual account of the incident, including the exact words Brenda used and the revelation of Adrian's chairman's circle badge to an internal airline employee message board. He intended it as a warning to his colleagues. The leak quickly jumped from the employee board to a major industry news site, Airline Insider Weekly, which ran the story with the headline, "Prejudiced Gate Agent Fires Herself, Insults Atlantic Skyways Top VIP." The story was picked up by local news outlets covering the firings of Brenda Hayes and Doug Peterson. It was no longer an internal issue. It was a public spectacle. Brenda's social media profiles, which were public, were discovered. A wave of intense, directed public fury crashed down on her. Her apartment complex manager called her, citing multiple complaints from neighbors who had seen her face on the news, accusing her of bringing negative attention to the building. An older aunt, who had secured Brenda the job at Atlantic Skyway 15 years prior, called her, weeping and saying, "You threw away a respectable career because of your own foolishness and malice." Worse still, Brenda had 2 children enrolled in a private school in Queens. Her ex-husband, Michael, called her, furious. "Brenda, the school administration called me." Michael's voice was ragged with anger. "They want to know if the woman on the news, the one fired for discrimination, is their mother. Do you understand the shame you've brought on our kids? I'm going to petition the court for sole custody immediately, based on your demonstrated professional and ethical instability." The loss of her job was a financial calamity. The public exposure was humiliating, but the threat to her relationship with her children was the true, devastating strike of karma. Brenda, who had judged a successful man based on a shallow glance, was now facing the judgment of the world and the potential loss of everything she truly valued. The termination of Brenda Hayes and Doug Peterson quickly led to financial ruin, the inevitable result of career destruction combined with public shaming. The loss of steady income meant the immediate default on Brenda's apartment rent and, critically, the inability to pay for the private school tuition. Her ex-husband, Michael, followed through on his threat and filed for an emergency motion for sole custody, citing her gross ethical failure as reported in the press. Brenda desperately needed legal counsel, but the termination meant she couldn't afford a divorce attorney, let alone fight the custody battle. She called her sister Sharon, pleading for a loan. "Sharon, please, I need a good lawyer, or Michael is going to take the kids away. I made a mistake, but I'm not a bad mother," Brenda begged over the phone, tears streaming down her face. "I know you're hurting, Brenda," Sharon replied, gently, but firmly. "But you know the money situation. And honestly, Brenda, how could you be so foolish? You were at the counter, your whole life savings tied up in your job and those school fees, and you threw it all away because of some snap judgment. This is karma, Brenda. Hard, ugly karma." Brenda hung up, realizing she was entirely alone. Her attempts to find new employment were met with polite refusals. A simple Google search of her name immediately brought up the Airline Insider Weekly article. She was professionally radioactive. Meanwhile, Doug Peterson, the former shift manager, fared little better. The airline not only fired him, but initiated a lawsuit to reclaim the $50 amenity voucher expense, arguing he committed fraud by instructing a subordinate to misrepresent a customer service action. Though a token sum, the legal action was a public and humiliating statement by Atlantic Skyway, ensuring Doug's own employment prospects were equally destroyed. Adrian Vance's return flight to JFK was, predictably, a masterpiece of luxury. He was met at the gate by Alistair Finch, who had flown over just to supervise the departure. And on arrival in New York, he was personally escorted through customs by a member of the chairman's Circle security detail, who delivered him directly to his waiting town car. As he was driven home, Adrian reflected on the extreme consequences of his simple email. He hadn't sought revenge. He had sought justice and a system correction. Yet, the fallout was more severe than he had anticipated, leading to 2 total career destructions and a custody battle. Later that evening, Adrian received an unexpected email. It was from Gary Sinclair, the junior gate agent. Gary had tracked down Adrian's private assistant to get the contact. Subject: regarding Gate A14 incident, JFK. Dear Mr. Vance, I am Gary Sinclair, the junior agent who was standing next to Ms. Hayes that night. I wanted to reach out, not for any reward, but to assure you that I immediately corrected the record in my statement to corporate security. I confirmed that Ms. Hayes deliberately called you suspicious and ignored your badge, and that your conduct was exemplary. However, I also wanted to share something that has troubled me. Ms. Hayes's actions were inexcusable, but the consequences, the loss of her job, and now the impending loss of her children to her ex-husband because she can't afford a lawyer, are devastating. Her ex-husband is using the public article to prove ethical instability. Sir, I know this is entirely outside of your concern, but I was the one who inadvertently provided the details that led to the public reporting. I only wanted to warn my colleagues about the severity of the mistake. I feel immense guilt knowing that my action has resulted in a mother potentially losing her children. Adrian read the email several times. Gary's genuine distress was palpable. The young agent's act of whistleblowing had led to a righteous outcome, Brenda's firing and the corporate shakeup, but also to a disproportionately cruel personal one, the custody battle. This was the final, unexpected twist of the drama. Adrian's fight for professional respect had become the central weapon in a mother's fight to keep her children. Adrian closed his eyes, considering the concept of true justice versus vengeance. Brenda was guilty of prejudice, but even prejudice did not warrant the destruction of her family. The hard karma had struck, but perhaps Adrian had a final, quiet role to play. He opened his laptop and drafted a concise, 2-line email to his own high-powered legal team. Action item: urgent. Investigate the custody case of Brenda Hayes. Retain the best possible family law counsel to represent Ms. Hayes pro bono on a single condition: absolute non-disclosure of my involvement. Objective: ensure fair representation, not victory. Adrian Vance, the man who had the power to destroy an entire career with a single email, was now using his resources to prevent the total destruction of the life of the woman who had insulted him. He realized that true power wasn't just in bringing justice, but in knowing when to temper the consequences. His integrity was restored, and now perhaps he could offer a chance for Brenda to restore hers, however hard her path might be. Adrian Vance's precise 2-line instruction to his legal team set in motion an intricate and discreet operation designed to temper the harsh judgment that Brenda Hayes was facing. His directive was simple: provide her with the highest caliber legal representation, but maintain absolute anonymity. His goal was not salvation, but ensuring the scales of justice, already tilted heavily by her prejudice and his subsequent actions, found a more equitable balance regarding her children. 3 days after Adrian's instruction, a certified letter arrived at the small, cluttered Queen's apartment Brenda now shared with her sister, Sharon. The envelope bore the expensive letterhead of Whitman and Gray, a family law institution whose services were legendary and priced accordingly. Brenda, wearing a borrowed sweater and feeling the gnawing stress of debt and impending legal doom, stared at the firm's name. It was impossible. She hadn't even finished the paperwork for legal aid yet. The letter, coolly professional, explained that the firm had been retained to represent her in the matter of Hayes vs. Hayes through a new, private, anonymous fund dedicated to ensuring fair legal counsel for financially distressed parents in complex custody cases. The firm would handle everything. She was required to sign an agreement of absolute non-disclosure regarding the benefactor's identity and consent to communicate exclusively with Eleanor Ellie Rossi, the administrative partner handling the file. The assistance was contingent only on her full cooperation and honesty. Brenda's hands trembled as she signed. It was not a lottery win. It felt more like a terrifying, unexpected reprieve from a higher power. She suspected it had to be a cynical publicity stunt by her ex-husband, Michael, or perhaps an attempt by the airline to pay off their guilt by funding her defense. But the term strictly forbade discussing the airline or the incident. She felt the cold, powerful presence of a truly anonymous force entering her desperate life. Her assigned attorney, Mr. Thomas O'Connell, was a force of nature, a man whose presence commanded respect in any courtroom. In his opulent midtown office, O'Connell wasted no time on pleasantries. "Ms. Hayes, the court record, thanks to the press coverage, is already poisoned against you," O'Connell stated, leaning forward, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Your ex-husband's counsel will use the Atlantic Skyway incident as the sole evidence of your moral instability and disregard for ethical conduct. They will argue that if you are capable of such willful, career-ending prejudice in a professional setting, you are unfit to raise children." Brenda finally broke down, the shame flooding out of her in ragged sobs. "I know, Mr. O'Connell. I was wrong. I was tired. I was bitter, and I made a terrible mistake. I saw Mr. Vance, and I let my own failures and biases come out. I destroyed my own life, but I am a good mother. I have always put those children first. We are not here to debate your career, Ms. Hayes. We are here to defend your right to parent," O'Connell countered, his voice steadying her. "The key to this case is proving that the gate incident, however egregious, was an isolated ethical failure, a moment of profound poor judgment, and not an ingrained chronic character defect that endangers your children." O'Connell demanded total transparency. He spent weeks building a counter-narrative, meticulously documenting Brenda's involvement in her children's school life, securing affidavits from former teachers and babysitters attesting to her dedication, and contrasting her professional failure with her maternal consistency. The cost of this work, Adrian knew, ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The final court ruling was delivered 2 months later. It was not a total victory, but it was a comprehensive salvage operation. The judge, while acknowledging Brenda's genuine remorse and the overwhelming evidence of her competent mothering, stated that the financial and public turmoil created by her actions was too immediate to ignore. The ruling. Michael Hayes was awarded primary physical custody for the time being. However, O'Connell had structured the agreement to include joint legal custody for Brenda, giving her equal say in the children's major decisions and a robust, non-negotiable visitation schedule that included every other weekend and shared holidays. Crucially, the order included a structured pathway for Brenda to petition for a review and regain primary custody once she demonstrated 12 consecutive months of stable employment and independent housing. It was a tough but unequivocally fair judgment. Brenda had not escaped the consequences of her prejudice, but the worst possible karma, the total loss of her children, had been averted by the anonymous power of Adrian Vance. The hard-won second chance was all due to the man she had so casually insulted. Back in Boston, Gary Sinclair, the junior agent whose integrity had launched the entire chain of events, accepted his promotion to a supervisor role. The airline used his story internally as a case study. Reward integrity, punish malice. Gary knew he did the right thing, and the airline had rewarded his ethical action, reinforcing the new, more transparent corporate culture. Brenda, now working as a retail clerk and rebuilding her life one paycheck at a time, finally had peace regarding her children. She knew her path to regaining primary custody would be long and arduous, but it was possible. She often looked at the framed copy of the non-disclosure agreement, wondering about the source of the help. Who had the power and the complexity of character to crush her career, yet save her family? Meanwhile, Adrian Vance received the final report from Ellie Rossi while on a private jet en route to Tokyo. The 2 lines of text. Result: joint legal custody. Robust visitation rights secured. Client is back on her feet. Were all the affirmation he needed. He had started the journey with a demand for respect, fueled by a legitimate sense of outrage. He used his immense, hard-earned power to bring down swift justice. But in the final act, he used that same power not for vengeance, but for a profound, anonymous act of grace. Adrian Vance understood that he was not only fighting prejudice at the gate, he was fighting the prejudice that exists in the justice system when wealth and access are absent. He had forced Brenda to face the reality of her judgment, and then, having won, stepped back to ensure her punishment fit the crime rather than destroying her life entirely. He closed his tablet. The A14 incident was now entirely a closed chapter. Adrian's integrity, the airline's culture, and Brenda's path toward redemption had all been redefined by the drama that unfolded around one ignored VIP badge. The story was over, the karma delivered, and the quiet, unseen hand of justice was withdrawn. Adrian Vance walked away with his dignity and his power intact, forcing an entire global corporation to change its culture and fire 2 employees. But the real lesson here isn't just about the VIP badge. It's about the devastating and rapid domino effect of prejudice in a modern, hyper-connected world. Brenda Hayes lost her livelihood and almost lost her children, all because of one dismissive, biased word. Suspicious. What would you have done? Would you have yelled, demanded a refund, or pursued the silent, surgical justice that Adrian Vance chose? Every time you face an injustice, your reaction defines your power. Don't forget to like this video if you believe accountability is essential. Share this incredible story with friends and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss the next hard-hitting, true-life karma story. Let us know in the comments below. Should Adrian have helped Brenda, or was that too much mercy?